Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. And today I am giving out my trade board 1.0. We got 15 players on this trade board. It's going to be based on how good they are as well as how likely it is. I'm not just going to clickbait and have like Tage Thompson number 2 on this. It's a blend of the two. The good players that could potentially end up getting traded. And yeah, this is inspired obviously by Pavel Mintyukov and Brad Lambert. This week it came out that both of them are potentially seeking a trade relatively soon to get more of an opportunity than they currently are, as well as just like being a quarter of the way through the NHL season. We kind of know what teams might end up being sellers: the Calgary Flames, the Nashville Predators, the Buffalo Sabres for the 10th straight year. So we're going to be going through it, and we're going to start with number 15 and work our way, build some momentum until we get to that number 1, even though I think number 1's kind of obvious. At number 15, Jonathan Marchessault. He's having a little bit of a rough start to the season. He only has 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points in 17 games. But like everybody on Nationals having a rough start to the season, they're yet again going to be selling most likely at this deadline. He does have 4 years left at $5.5 million and in his mid-30s. This guy is a Conn Smythe. This guy consistently produces in the playoffs. And even last year, he had 56 points. So I don't think that he's completely washed at this point. And it wouldn't surprise me if some team that badly needs some scoring goes after Jonathan Marchessault. And if you're Nashville, you probably just want that contract off your books, although that would be Barry Trotz admitting that he completely messed up in the 2024 offseason. Will he swallow his pride and make the kind of right decision? We'll see. Jonathan Marchessault at number 15. At number 14, the latest addition to this list, Brad Lambert. When looking at Brad Lambert in his draft year +2 in the AHL, he was so goddamn good. It kind of solidified himself, at the time at least, as a top 30 prospect in hockey. But last year was pretty underwhelming. I've talked to some people in Winnipeg. Apparently the motor/attitude is a problem with Brad Lambert. The talent is definitely there, the playmaking, the hands, but it's just not going to happen in Winnipeg at this point, considering they're a team where their window is very much the next 3 to 4 years. They want to win now. And Brad Lambert, they don't have time to give him 15, 16 minutes a night. I don't really know what team has the opportunity to give him that, but I think it's definitely not going to happen in Winnipeg for the foreseeable future. So I think he could get moved, and I could see Cheveldayoff packaging him, not for picks, not for another struggling prospect, but throwing him in a package for a more prominent player that can help the Winnipeg Jets win right now. Brad Lambert 14. At 13, Steven Stamkos. When looking at him, the problem is that he's making $8 million the next 3 seasons. It would have to be retained, but similar to Marchessault, I think somebody would want Steven Stamkos at like a $5.56 million cap hit. Last year was bad. He still ended up having 27 goals. This year it's really bad with 5 points in 20 games, but I think teams are kind of circling the water still for potentially getting a Steven Stamkos. The shot is still elite, just has not had the playmakers, passers around him that he did have in Tampa Bay. So yeah, I think Steven Stamkos, and I think he might be open for a trade to go to some kind of contender, considering how disastrous it has been in Nashville for him. At number 12, I'm going with Jean-Gabriel Pageau. Definitely less likely that he gets traded than, say, at the start of the season, than, say, after the New York Islanders started out 0-3. I probably would have had him like top 5 on a trade board. But there's a possibility that Cal Ritchie just continues to play better and better and just like demands that third line center role. And Matthew Darche could move off of JG Pageau and get maybe a young player instead of just like picks, instead of like a second and a third round pick. I could see that happening. And JG Pageau is going to be very, very coveted as that ideal two-way, more so defensive third line center that can also get you half a point per game and can kill penalties at a high rate. So yeah, for the New York Islanders, I just hope that they don't give him some kind of Adam Lowry 5-year, $5 million contract. I think that's an okay deal for the Winnipeg Jets, considering their timeline is the next 3 to 4 years. But for my New York Islanders, they're going to definitely have an interesting situation on their hands with JG Pageau. I think they're either going to extend him or trade him by the deadline, and it's still definitely possible. They're not a shoe-in to make the playoffs. Unless they're safely in a playoff spot, I would probably move off Jean-Gabriel Pageau just because he is in his early to mid-30s and is not a long-term piece to this team. At number 11, give me Kiefer Sherwood. He's a fan favorite, so I wouldn't be shocked if Vancouver, who still thinks that they're a high-level team, ends up re-signing him, but they stink right now, so of course you can't rule that out, considering this guy right now has 12 goals, 16 points in 22 games. He's shooting 30%. That's not sustainable. But even last year, he went for 20 and 20 and absolutely smashed the all-time single-season hits record. And he's only making $1.5 million. So Vancouver, who is out of the playoff race by a decent amount right now, they get offered a first and a third round pick, a first and a decent prospect. I think you got to accept that if you still have a 46% points percentage come the deadline, and teams will be frothing out the mouth for a guy like Sherwood to add them to his third line, a guy that has that physicality, has that goal scoring ability. He is going to be very, very sought after. And again, when you don't have a Chicago or San Jose most likely selling like you had in prior years, guys like Kiefer Sherwood are going to be very, very valuable. At number 10, Anthony Mantha. He's been fantastic for the Pittsburgh Penguins to start out the season. 8 goals, 14 points in 19 games. The Malkin Brazo Mantha line has been damn good. Those big ass dudes, they've outscored opponents 9-6 thus far. And I feel like people just forget how good Mantha was pre his injuries before leaving Detroit. He was a good first liner. I'm not saying he's a good first liner right now, but he'd be a great piece for a lot of contending teams' middle sixes. And he's only making $2.5 million. The only problem is, Pittsburgh might be one of those playoff teams at this point. Like, they are not slowing down that much. So similarly to the New York Islanders, I think if you're not safely in a spot, I'd move off Mantha because, again, he's 31 years old. He is injury prone, and he can probably get you like a second and a third round pick. And he's not part of the future at 31. So yeah, that's going to be very interesting. I don't have Rust and Raquel or Carlson on this trade board anymore, just because I think they're not going to trade those key pieces while they're still competitive. But I think Anthony Mantha is a guy that even if Pittsburgh's like clinging on to that last wild card spot, I could see Kyle Dubas just say, he's an expiring guy. Give me a second and a third round pick. But moving off Rust and Raquel, who have term, you don't really have to make that decision right now. I don't think happens, but I think Anthony Mantha could happen in terms of a trade for the Pittsburgh Penguins. At number 9, Braden Shen. He has been brutal, much like a Steven Stamkos. Only 6 points and a -15 on a team where the St. Louis Blues are just playing horrible. He's been arguably their worst player thus far, and I still think old head general managers, would be dumb enough to give up assets or take on his contract for free. He has 3 years left at $6.5 million. If you're St. Louis, yes, it stinks that he's your captain, but to fully transition to that next generation, that Robert Thomas, give Robert Thomas the captaincy and just move off Braden Shen. You're not making the playoffs this year. He's only getting worse every single season. He has been regressing the last 3 to 4 years. It's time to move off Shen until like general managers fully have to admit, like if this season he only has 25 points heading into next season, he'll have no trade value. If you move off him relatively soon, you might get something. Eventually, general managers will catch up that this guy has lost a step and is no longer a legit second liner. At number 8, Yegor Chinnikov. This guy wanted out all of last summer. They ended up healthy scratching him the first couple of games, but then putting him back in the lineup, and his ice time has gone down from 15 minutes down to 10. But unlike a Brad Lambert, he has somewhat of an NHL track record. The prior 2 seasons, he was around half a point per game, only makes $2.1 million. I'm surprised nobody gave up like a third, fourth round pick to get him this summer, just considering he has shown it at the NHL level that he can be solid. And yeah, I think that this has to get solved at some point. You can't just keep on playing this guy at 10 minutes and then he literally has no trade value and then he just walks. You don't qualify him as a restricted free agent or something and he just walks this summer. I think he might get traded. Maybe Columbus is going to package him in some kind of deal, but I think Yegor Chinnikov, if you're a bad team that's trying to get younger, he's worth the shot, considering what he did the 2 prior years in Columbus. At number 7, give me Michael Bunting, a deadline rental, $4.5 million for like an ideal third liner. You get half retention on that down to 2.25. And yeah, he's just been a physical, half a point per game guy. Like, I see a lot of lists that have Stamkos or Marchessault higher than a Michael Bunting, and I'm a little bit confused because I don't think Bunting is much worse of a player, and he's a rental compared to those other guys that have multiple years left at much higher salary cap hits. So yeah, Bunting should get moved at this year's deadline, maybe even ahead of this year's deadline because the Predators season is basically already over. Get ahead of it, and you could probably get a second round pick for Michael Bunting, just considering his style of play and his production the last couple of years. At number 6, Nazem Kadri. This guy is a guy, unlike Stamkos, that has been pretty good in recent years. He had 75 points 2 years ago, 67 points last year, and this year 14 points in 22 games. He is 35 years old and has 4 years left at $7 million. But right now, he could be a second-line center on a serious playoff team. Not sure a Stanley Cup winner, but definitely a serious team that maybe could potentially win the Stanley Cup. But yeah, he has been very productive come playoff time, 44 points in 52 career playoff games, plays physical style of hockey. Teams are going to want Nazem Kadri. Are the Flames going to sell him now because he is kind of like their best forward, at least right now? And they also don't have to make a decision on him right now, considering he has 4 years. Maybe he makes that a little bit less likely. And teams might also want some retention because you don't want to be paying Nazem Kadri $7 million at 38 years old. So I'm not sure Calgary will retain, but I think someone might also just take him on at $7 million, considering so many teams have second line center problems. He could potentially be the answer. At number 5, another Calgary Flame, Blake Coleman, much more manageable contract, 2 years, $4.9 million for like that ideal physical third liner. That's what he was in Tampa when they won 2 Stanley Cups. Not saying he's that same caliber of player, but yeah, he's like a 30 to 35 point, very solid two-way third liner. What team doesn't want to add that for sub $2.5 million after the retention at the deadline? And I think for Calgary, he's a guy that they should definitely move off of in terms of the young forwards, young wingers that they have within their system. Got to make room, got to make ice time for those guys, and it starts potentially trading a Blake Coleman. At number 4, here's where I put Pavel Mitnyakov, because we saw in that rookie year the talent that this guy has. I still think he's a solid puck mover. And yeah, he's 21 years old, has like 130 NHL games under his belt. But you look at him in Anaheim, and they have Jackson Lacombe on the left side. He's already getting franchise number 1 money. He's already a number 1 defenseman for them, as well as Owen Zellweger looking very good start this season. He's kind of stuck in that third left-handed defenseman spot with no power play time. So yeah, I understand him wanting out, and teams should rightfully so be aggressive for Pavel Mitnyakov, considering the track record. Yeah, to sum it up, basically, I still think Pavel Mitnyakov can be a solid to good second pair, second power play kind of guy based on the flashes that I've seen from him. And again, just what he did at 19 years old. He has been passed by guys like Jackson Lacombe. Like, it's crazy. Imagine telling someone in 2023, 2024 that Lacombe would have passed him and gotten that big deal. Meanwhile, Mitnyakov would have been on the trade block. It's wild. But yeah, Anaheim is set in terms of left-handed defensemen. They need right-handed defensemen. They need like a third line center. So it makes sense potentially move off Mitnyakov and maybe address one of those needs. And a lot of teams towards the bottom of the standings that are trying to get younger should definitely be interested in Pavel Mitnyakov. We're into the top 3, and I think the 3 players should be kind of consensus. I'm pretty confident in my order, but up first, we have Alex Tuch of the Buffalo Sabres, the most talented of the 3, the best player right now, but I think probably the least likely to get traded. Buffalo would not shock me one bit if they end up re-signing him on an 8-year deal for his age 30 to 37 seasons. But yeah, if he is available, every single team will be salivating, especially now that the UFA market has basically been entirely wiped out. He can consistently give you 30-ish goals, 70-ish points. He's 6'4", he's big. And yeah, if you're the Buffalo Sabres, logic would say that if this team is out of the playoffs by a decent amount, like they are right now, they're 6 points back, only a quarter of the way through the season, you probably shouldn't give Alex Tuch some kind of 8-year deal for the back half of his career. I think if you're Buffalo, you don't trade Dahlin and Thompson until they literally tell you, like, we want out. Those are the cornerstone pieces. But I think if someone offers you a first and a promising young roster player for Alex Tuch, I think it's just something that you got to do. You got to shake it up somehow, and Kevin Adams probably should be fired. At number 2, Ryan O'Reilly, 1.5 years at $4.5 million for the ideal third line center. The idea does not get more perfect for a championship level team to get a Ryan O'Reilly, who 2 seasons ago, 69 points, last year still like mid-50s, and to start this season, yet again on that like 50-ish pace, very good defensively. We obviously know that. With Ryan O'Reilly, he is going to be, especially considering he has term, just so much value. You could probably get a first and a third, a first and a second maybe, first and a good prospect. Just considering he fits such a need and he's not just this 1-year rental. They should probably move off Ryan O'Reilly. So again, Stamkos and Marchessault, you're probably not getting shit for. Bunting, you might get something decent. O'Reilly really could get you something. I know you're not trading Forsberg, Yossi, or Saros. Those are like your cornerstone pieces. But Ryan O'Reilly is the guy that can really, that trade can really send them into the rebuild that they should fully commit to. And yeah, most teams, basically every single playoff team, would love to have a Ryan O'Reilly. And he'd be an upgrade for their third line center position. And then at number 1, Rasmus Andersson, not that much of a shocker here. Right-handed defenseman, pending unrestricted free agent. Did have a bit of a down year last year, but appears to be back. 12 points in 22 games. The amount of teams that have deficiencies on the right side is one of the most premier positions in hockey. Center, then right-handed defenseman. And I think, much like Noah Hannafin, I think you probably trade for him and then get an extension in place. So I think the return would be pretty big in terms of like a first and a second, and maybe even a prospect on top of that. And considering Calgary is the worst team in the NHL right now, they should probably trade him. There's no reason. You already have Huberdeau and Uyghur on long-term deals as older guys. You don't need to add another long-term contract that, and at least those made sense because you were trying to compete at a high level. No reason to re-sign Rasmus Anderson, especially when you have Zane Parekh up in the wings on the right side. Trade Rasmus Anderson. I'm pretty confident that they will. They're going to get an absolute haul, but let's go through it again. Rasmus Anderson, Ryan O'Reilly, Alex Tuch, Pavel Mitnikov, Blake Coleman, Nazem Kadri, Michael Bunting, Yegor Chinnikov, Shen, Mantha, Sherwood, JG Peugeot, Stamkos, Lambert, and Marchessault. Let me know in the comments. What do you think? Some other names that I maybe thought of. I thought about putting UC Saros, but I just don't see. That would really be Barry Trotz. Holy shit, admitting that I fucked up and I moved off Askarov and now I'm trading Saros. So I don't see Saros getting traded mid-season. Nedeljkovic could get traded. He's playing pretty good for the San Jose Sharks. Teams need goaltending. Matthew Joseph is a pending unrestricted free agent, only making $3 million. Solid bottom sixer. I could see a team in the playoffs trade for him, as well as Brendan Othman. Just doesn't really have that much value, if we're going to be honest. And Artemi Panarin, does not appear like he's loving that Mike Sullivan system. And if the Rangers are out of a playoff spot, maybe they potentially trade him. But that's for Trade Board 2.0, maybe. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this video? Who'd you move up? Who'd you move down? I'll be seeing the next one. Peace.